Revered and respected by our ancestors for thousands of years, demonized and suppressed by the war on drugs, and now at the dawn of a new millennia, they are making their triumphant return. Scientists, researchers, and patients alike are exploring these ancient therapies to heal modern ailments. And we're here to bring you the latest in scientific research, cutting-edge practices, and first-hand experiences from those who have been transformed in body, mind, and spirit by plant medicines from cannabis to psilocybin to ayahuasca and beyond. This is the Plant Medicine Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Plant Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Lynn Marie Morsky, your guide in this journey. And today we are going to be discussing whether or not ayahuasca can help promote Palestinian-Israeli reconciliation with Dr. Lior Roseman and Antoine Saka. Lior is a postdoc at the Center for Psychedelic Research at Imperial College London, where he also received his PhD and master's under the supervision of Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris and Professor David Nutt. His research interests are diverse and cover neuroscientific, phenomenological, therapeutic, and psychosocial aspects of psychedelic use. Antoine graduated from the Arab American University of Jenin with the BA in Public Law. Antoine spent 5 years as Director of Programs of Bethlehem's Holy Land Trust, worked as Program Coordinator at the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation, and worked as a research assistant for urbanization and geopolitical monitoring at the Applied Research Institute in Jerusalem. He was also a youth leader and a member of the One Voice movement. I have to start off by saying I highly recommend you check out the publication that we reference in this show. It's not like your average scientific publication. There's so many personal insights and stories and interviews with the Palestinians and Israelis who had gone through these ayahuasca ceremonies, and it's a really good look for somebody like myself who has no experience as to what it is like to be an Israeli or a Palestinian, only knowing the conflict from the outside, from very far away. I think it gives you great insight into their experiences and also how ayahuasca can significantly transform their view of each other's communities and each other as a whole. And it was a really uplifting read for me, and it gave me a lot of hope for some of the potential of the future, because we were used to talking about some of like the mental health science type things, and it's great to see this more kind of social use of these medicines. Obviously, like, psychedelics are not a catch-all for everything, but it was brilliant to see the possibility that existed when ayahuasca groups brought these two different cultures together. All right, now without further ado, thanks so much for joining us, Lior and Antoine.
Pleasure.
It's a real honor to have both of you on. This is such an important paper, and I'm really glad that you all are here to discuss your findings and your methods and all those things with us. But I would love to start by hearing a little bit about each of you and your backgrounds and what led you to doing this kind of work. We can start with you, Antoine.
Well, thank you. I'm from Bethlehem, born in Bethlehem in the West Bank. I'm a Palestinian. Been working with civil society since I became an adult. I always had interest in looking specifically at the dynamics and of peacemaking in this land, and not only looking at the dynamics, but being also part of a generation that grew up at a time of possibilities of peace were starting in the early 90s. So this is the background that I come with, being working for a long time with civil society, and specifically looking at joint spaces, looking at reconciliation work, conflict resolution work, and this had brought me eventually to look into the field of trauma and how trauma has affected and how it affects our vision seeking and our attitude for peacemaking as peace activists. And once you tap into this pool, you start to getting introduced to all the methods and all the gifts that we have globally into trying to empower individuals, which brought me eventually to encounter medicine work and start asking and exploring about the possibilities of what we can learn from this medicine, from the space of that exists in the world, into how and what could be brought out to the relational level that we experience in communities collectively in the bigger scale.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you, Lior?
Yeah, so I'm Israeli, and I'm a neuroscientist by training. So I moved to London to do a master's and PhD 8 years ago. So with Robin Carruth Harris and with David Nutt. So kind of been in that lab doing master's, PhD, doing now postdoc. And my main line of investigation was usually was like neuroscientific. So what happens in the brain under LSD or psilocybin, and then therapeutic, so kind of therapeutic mechanism and kind of investigating the experience and stuff like this. But as my kind of personal journey with psychedelics has a lot of like personal meaningful events in my life, but also a lot of ones which are in collective, so in groups of friends or in the rituals in Brazil, and kind of always felt that there's something missing in the research component for me, studying personal, the individual and not groups. So kind of had this kind of incentive to try to bring that into research. And an Israeli living in London had this kind of and kind of working in this kind of utopian research movement, kind of have this drive to maybe bring some good into back to my home. So kind of combining these two and wanting to do a research on conflict resolution and stuff like this.
Very
Yeah.
nice. Very nice. Well, thank you both for sharing. And the article we're going to be discussing is called Relational Processes in Ayahuasca Groups of Palestinians and Israelis, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. But this is a fascinating article. And if Antoine, if you could start by telling us a little bit about the background for what led you to doing this specific study.
Will share as much as I can remember, and Lior, feel free to jump in also. So it's again, it's like the interest of really coming to experience, see, and observe that there is actually joint spaces where Israelis, whether intentionally or not, Israelis and Palestinians have been going to spaces on personal growth matters most of the time, uh, getting to a reality where they are sitting in the same room, drinking the brew together, and we've experienced individuals or on an individual level or in groups of how this kind of work on a personal level even leads into a greater connection on the collective and a greater sensation to what exists in our ecosystem and in our realities. And from that, it's not, there's no way to deny that when you are in a space of a conflict, that to say that it's almost like to say that it's not going to be connected, that you're not going to see anything related, that you're not going to experience anything related, and to actually give an intentionality to look at it and to see what exists there right now and to see what it could be supported. Because coming from a space of being almost my all my adulthood and my work till today focused around joint spaces, we see how there is always a need for intentionality around those experiences, and that comes to preparation, to integration work afterwards, and leaving elephants in the room sometimes is not helpful. And so part of it is this interest to see if there's something we can learn and if there's something we could give back to this community. Because again, people have gone for personal growth matter and definitely have came to experience something related to the collective. And we've seen that through the interviews that were collected in the research, where people have eventually came to points to encounter the other or encounter the conflict, even though that might not have even been the intention set from the beginning of for them to go there. And again, it's also part of the reality that this kind of space always will exist, whether it's happening in the Holy Land itself or whether it's happening in the Amazon itself. You'll find a day and a moment where an Israeli and a Palestinian will end up in the same space. And to really to give that an understanding and to give that to shed light on it, to shed light on the potential also of it, we see again how much a lot of light is coming from, let's say, from this work that has been happening even somehow underground and somehow not intentionally, and to say like let's look at it, let's look at what's there. Lior, if you want to tap in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, yeah, kind of similar answer, and saying that, the our long-term intention is also like to create a program which is a bit more politically oriented to bring Israelis and Palestinians. So this is kind of a long-term intention, but it would be naive to start doing that as a neuroscientist or, as people, as just kind of jumping into it and just like this, bring a group of people and connect them. that would be like a naive move to do. So the 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 current publication is an observational research on groups which are not intentional. They're not for peace building. They're not for conflict resolution. They just happen to be in the same space, and that brings something to consciousness because set and setting is crucial. So. And this is what we want to learn from. We want to learn from what's happening underground, what's happening already, and learn what we can learn from these groups, from people's experience, and what is also our criticism and what we want to improve. So this is kind of what's the intention of it. It's like a first step for as part of like a longer path. Uh, yeah.
Nice, nice. And Antoine, can you tell us a little bit about the methods that you used?
So I'll say what I'm conscious of, and you're more the brain of the science here. But
Oh, you can
in
throw back to him either way.
yeah, in our method, we interviewed people, basically asked them based on a questionnaire, multiple questions that related to their personal experience and to how they made many questions related to what happened to them, questions to what they made out of it for them in their life after, and we almost like measured what is there from that people were able to share. And it wasn't of like going asking people to only talk about the conflict. We asked with curiosity, did this come up to you, this element of the conflict, did it come up to you in any way? Because we see also that sometimes people come to experience reality is not necessarily in the form and the shape that we know it in the normal day life. And psychedelic experiences, it comes through revelations, sometimes it comes through visual experience sometimes. And so we were really seeking with curiosity to get to hear with people if they had anything that was related to this collective, to this experience, to their identity, into the land, into the conflict itself. And so that was our mean in a way to try and get the stories that allure us more and more to the relational behaviors that Lior can talk more about and measuring them.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. So interviews is the main method, and it was a road trip of a month and a half of doing kind of Israel and Palestine, and Antoine and me doing few interviews a day, going between places. And in total, there are 31 interviews. Each one is like around 2 hours, so it's kind of very detailed conversations. The analysis of the interviews is called grounded theory. So the idea of grounded theory, so it's qualitative research, and grounded theory is like a very thorough way of doing qualitative research, which suggests that you try to limit kind of the top-down influence of your own priors as a researcher, and you try to code the data as in a bottom-up way. It's kind of like it's kind of hard work, but it's really trying to bring the voices of the people in the interview and then develop a theory based on that. But because this is really the first step from a larger project, doing a qualitative approach and a bottom-up approach is kind of was important for us, you know. So it's not questionnaires, it's not about like measuring things, it's about listening to stories and making meaning out of them.
I bet that was fascinating for you all on that road trip of interviews hearing
Yeah,
about this
super fun.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can
Yeah,
you talk a little bit about kind of the specifics? Lior will stay on you for this. Like how, you said there were 31 interviews total, but maybe tell a little bit about, was it one group of 31 or were they done in multiple groups, and a little bit about the mixes of the group, and then also, if you could both speak to the limitations that you were mentioning in the article with Palestinians still being in the minority in many ways in these groups.
sure. So yeah, so these are out. The people come from 5 different groups. Three of the groups, so two are led by Israeli men, one Israeli woman, one Palestinian man, and another European. And 5 groups, they're all kind of neo-shamanic, new age spirituality, like getting from the Amazon, from Judaism, for Islam, and kind of from Christianity, and kind of mixing a lot of elements. And they all come for inner personal work, because this is kind of the kind of the psychedelic, the neo-shamanic psychedelic practice. The ceremonies, though, although they're inner, they're very much participatory. So all of the groups, it's not just like a retreat that people come for one time. There are groups that drink on a permanent basis, whether it's once a year or once every few months. But a lot of those groups develop to become a community, and people return. So people who begin in the group later becomes like, assistants and musicians. And there's kind of a process. Maybe they become shamans after, a few years, or facilitators. But there's a kind of a process for each group, and each group is like a tribe or a family. And uh, the participatory element is crucial. So the facilitators, they sing, maybe the first half of the ceremony, but during the second half of the ceremony, the more experienced kind of participants, they also can bring songs and prayers, and even the novice kind of participants can share their music in a way, and that allows the interaction, whether the interpersonal or the intercultural, international interaction to happen. uh, so that's the groups. And yeah, what you ask about the limitations. So the groups, because ayahuasca has been more time in Israel for Jewish people, there's also more accessibility to this. It's also related to socioeconomical status, and it's also related to traveling. So the kind of global, being part of like kind of the global ayahuasca kind of thing. So Israeli has more access to ayahuasca for the last 20 years, and Palestinians have been joining in the last decade. And so most of the groups were a minority of Palestinians, in which they join groups which Israelis have more like subcultural capital. So they kind of they know the songs, they know the language, not just Hebrew, but the kind of the jargon of the spiritual language. They wear the right clothes, and Palestinians comes is a minority also in the size. So if maybe 20% of the group is Palestinians, or even less of that, but also the minority on the language, and a minority with the kind of with the fashion, maybe sometimes. So that's kind of like the relations of larger society are also kind of part of the relations of the ritual itself. So there's still like a majority minority relationship there.
Interesting. Anything you wanted to add to that, Antoine?
Not much. I mean, you just see mirrors of reality dynamics outside in those small groups. So there wasn't something that was also surprising on this level, because this kind of experience, accessibility, is all like part of the power dynamic also that we observed in those spaces that also people, yeah, experience in a way. So it was
Yeah,
actually interesting to see all of that.
I imagine. And Antoine, let's stay on you. And can you talk a little bit about the kinds of themes that you saw coming out in these interviews that you did with these participants afterwards?
I mean, there's a collective, let's say, that people would, in most of the interviews, would refer to experience something related to the land. So that's something that you would almost get in every interview, where participants experience this deep connection, this deep euphoric connection to the land, this deep, bigger understanding even of what's this land is, what is land, where is land, basically. Also, and it is in many you see where they were in spaces where they've also been exposed to the other practice or culture that celebrates the land. You see how that also comes to a point of allowing even that openness of seeing again another narrative, another experience of, oh, I have a connection, and another have a connect, and others also have connection. And so that's mostly common related to experiencing the land. Experiencing the other, that's very common. People almost reported almost in most of what they've shared, but coming to those moments of being in the shoes of the other, having an experience from the shoes of the other, and those are again deep, deep experiences that trigger amazing empathetic experiences, empathy triggering experiences that we can learn from again, and a lot more related to, again, also, especially if you're interviewing female participants, the woman power in this land, the woman connection into the land, and seeing that role of the women and giving to the land, and this, and how this land is bleeding in a way as much as women are screaming and bleeding in this land. And you get to hear a lot of stories and a lot of experiences that eventually, when you look down to them and you see the commonality of humanity between people, which is a very nice thing. Again, other things that were common also were things that were not necessarily also nice. Sometimes it was common among Palestinians, for example, to hear in the interview that there was something that triggered this sense of separation, or that sense of insecurity, or that sense of we're seen or not seen. And so there is a collective that is sometimes that that you want to like loud it out, and there is collective that gets experienced that you want to focus on and say, okay, what is there missing and how can we support it? So yeah, I would say that's part of the stories we collected, and Lior can share more on the stories.
Sure, yeah. So this is like what Antoine described is also like part of, the changes that people go through. So the connection to land or the empowerment of women in the ceremonies, and the relationship between them. That was kind of like an interesting story that's kind of a few women shared. In the paper, we talked about themes which are experiential, so the kind of experiences that happened in the ceremony. And the paper describes like three main themes. One is like this unit, kind of one experience of oneness, the unitive experience in a collective level. So this is kind of identity, you can say identity dissolution, the kind of people saying we're just human, we're connecting, there's a lot of love, we connect to each other based on this shared humanity. So was something that many people mentioned, and it's kind of like was the obvious. Was the obvious thing, the thing we kind of, in a way, expected to hear, right? It's kind of part of the psychedelic culture. And then there was a theme which was because the rituals were participatory and music and prayers were kind of shared. A lot of times these opened up for people the kind of a strong connection to the other culture or the other people. And that was very meaningful for many people. They kind of see it as a moment of strong insight almost. The connection is kind of, like people saying, I always hated Arabic or was afraid of Arabic. And suddenly, through the music, Arabic kind of connected into me, and I'm like now not afraid of it anymore, and actually love it and love the music. So, kind of people reported this type of connection, which is interesting because it was also associated with this kind of moment of recognizing the other was associated with like awe or something big is happening. So as if the regular mental frameworks were broken in the same moment and something new happened, a big surprise happened through enjoying the music of the other. So that was the kind of recognition in a way, a strong spiritual form of recognition. And then there was what Antoine said in the beginning, there was like almost these political revelations or conflict related revelations, or revelations in which you see like yourself as the other in the conflict, or you see, or few Palestinian women who became the land, became the bleeding land and felt the pain of the land, or people who were like in the Nakba, or so it's the kind of Palestinian 48 catastrophe of being displaced from the homes. So kind of experiences that related to the Nakba, or experiences that related to the army service, and so on. So kind of very loaded revelations.
Yeah, I would love to, one of the most touching parts of the narratives that you all shared in the publication was the story of the gentleman who had been in the like Israeli elite combat forces. And would
Hmm.
either of you like to kind of share the story of what he had shared in his interview?
Sure, yeah, I can share. Yeah, because this story, like, I guess that guy is the one of the reasons we started with interviews. Because when he heard that we kind of want to do this kind of psychedelic peace research, he told me he contacted me and he told me about his story. Then I said, okay, there's a lot already happening. Let's go investigate this. And yeah, his story has been in the past in the elite army force, and after many years, traveling to India, being a backpacker, kind of the regular kind of psychedelic, sorry, Israeli backpacker, and psychedelic kind of initiation. He does many ayahuasca ceremonies, and then in one of the ceremonies, suddenly five Palestinians are in the ceremony, and they start like crying together, and he kind of sees it as like the collective pain of the Palestinians people in the moment. He kind of see them also as like a separate group within the Israeli group, and very dark. He feels like a very dark and painful force behind their cry. And then it triggers him, and he see a vision of himself in the army doing like a casual house arrest. So one of like a hundreds or more that he did. So regular house arrests, and he kind of with a combat unit. They wear ski masks, they hold their weapons, they break into a house, and they kind of find the guy they need to arrest in the house, and take him out. They put him in the jeep and they kind of drive. And when they put him in the jeep, he has a cut in the scene, and then he re-experiences everything from the side of the family. So it's like a dinner time. The grandfather is with the grandchild, watching TV. It's kind of like a fun evening of family together. And suddenly a group of soldiers enter into the house and break in, and suddenly everybody are like panicking, and there's hysteria in the house, and everybody feel like a lot of fear and pain. And he kind of sees himself from the side, and he sees his eyes through the ski mask, but from the side of the family now. And he kind of says, I looked like Robocop, or he says, I looked like the Nazis in the movies. He kind of says like quite hard things on himself from the side. And then they take the guy from the house, and the kind of, he stays with the pain in the house after the soldiers take him out. And then the vision ends, and he kind of goes back to the ceremony with his consciousness and full of guilt, the most guilt he had in his life probably. And he says that in that moment he almost had to like sing a song, and usually the songs are sang by participants by the end of the ceremony. And he kind of said, no, I want to sing it now. It's the beginning of the ceremony, but I kind of want to sing it now. And he came with like lots of confidence, and says that he felt like almost like had to deliver it, so like a preacher man. It's like he had the force, that just a song that had to come out of him. And he sang a song to the group of the moment, which is about the connection to the land and about the sacredness of the land. And it's kind of the lyrics in Hebrew, but it's kind of based on Native American peyote music. So he sings the song, and it feels it kind of releases the tension in the ceremony, and something special happens there. So something special with his connection to the Palestinian in the group is ignited in this moment. Also, one of the Palestinians in this group starts singing in Arabic a few songs later. It's kind of creates a certain motion in the group, and they become also friends later on. They continue to drink together. He starts learning Arabic after that. He kind of leaves the reserve army as well. But he's kind of still searching the meaning of this moment. It's kind of like it's been many, many years after, and it's still this moment, and this trauma is kind of like trying to find the meaning behind it. And it's kind of like a life journey for him, this event. Yeah.
Wow. Uh, Thank you for sharing that story on behalf of that gentleman. I thought that was so powerful. I loved how at the end he's studying Arabic. He wants to, I think he, like, as if to even deepen that connection more that he felt in that ceremony, in a way.
Mhm.
Antoine, would you like to share any of the stories that really stuck out to you when you were doing your interviews?
I mean, honestly, there's a lot. Many of them stuck out. You're hearing personal transformation of individuals who are living in a space of conflict. It's not just personal transformation, also, especially when it comes to those moments of what people experienced and how they experienced coming to encountering the other and the holistic of the other. And I'm not going to refer to a certain story, but I would tell you generally on the Palestinian side, that has been where the hardest work has been happening in individuals. And it's not the coming from an lack, it comes from the place that having to do that from the space of pain, in the time and the place of being in pain yet. And to be honest, this is where I've been always at bow, at ow actually, from hearing Palestinian peers when I've been interviewing them on what was that actually experience for them. Um, a lot of those Palestinians end up in the interviews telling you this is all amazing, but yet there is the reality. Yet we live under this kind of suppression, and they don't want to deny the connection that starts there. And so, really, what I would say brings me at bow is that just that resilience that people want to maintain, those human connecting experiencing healing human connecting experiences. And even if they're just keeping it for themselves and maintaining that shift that happened there, on really being able to being in love with the other, even though that other has been the enemy, basically. And so I would say those moments when people revealed to me how the other revealed to the was revealed to them without were the most deep for me, to be honest.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I was going to ask either one of you who wants to comment on this. You said that these were ongoing ayahuasca ceremonies, and then I think Leora, you had mentioned a little bit like, there's already kind of this movement, and people have been involved in it, which to me signals that perhaps these individuals already come with more of an open mindset than maybe average. Has there been any thought to doing this kind of maybe like a prospective study on people who are maybe medicine naive?
On medicine naive, so a purpose, purposefully bringing it into them in political space, or like,
Yes,
yeah,
to more of a conflict resolution using
yeah.
these, ayahuasca things, but without people who are kind of predetermined to
Mm.
already like self-select into this open-minded practice.
Sure. So yeah, I would say that, like, because there hasn't been any intentional political work with psychedelic, at least in kind of a Western framework, there's not a lot of that stuff going on. I would say that the first projects like this should be cautious, and actually, it's quite good to bring experienced people to this, because we don't know what actually, intentionally mixing those things can bring into, it can bring challenges to the session. So maybe naive people are still, too sensitive, maybe. But regarding your questions about the population, I can tell you that not all of people that came to the ceremonies came from like the peace camp or from left-leaning camp. So they come for psycho-spiritual growth, or even for physical illnesses, because they cannot heal themselves otherwise, and they heard that like this helps fibromyalgia, and I want to do ayahuasca, and they go there regardless if their politics. And there are many right-wing Israelis drinking ayahuasca. There are groups of settlers that drink ayahuasca, so they don't necessarily open to Palestinians. But what I'm saying is that the groups don't necessarily come, and they sometimes don't even know that there will be Palestinians. The Israelis sometimes don't know that there will be Palestinians there. That's not the reason they come to these groups. So some of our interviews came from a more like right wing background, or a more like a hawkish background.
Okay, great to know. Thanks for clarifying that point.
Yeah.
Antoine, where would you like to see this research or this type of research go in the future, and what kind of uses, beyond the research, do you think this would be helpful for?
I think this is also tapping to the question you asked Dior before, because eventually we understand that psychedelics is not for everyone, and everyone necessarily specifically at space of conflict sometimes, and it's known scientifically, it can be very counterproductive. And so to really honor that and understand that even those who we might see them as privileged, or those who might have access, or those who go to those spaces, and what is happening right now and what could happen in the future is related to us as humans, as communities, learning more what's related to the title that titled the research, the relational element. There is a lot of learning there that we can focus on understanding and deepening and bringing out. We specifically, I'm speaking from a space living in a conflict as a Palestinian, as a person who have been in community work related to relational reconciliation, let's say. There's a lot that we need to learn more and more, and to actually give it focus to see if it can help us in allowing to develop healthier relation on the bigger level. Now, and what I would like to see from this whole work to happen is to have it again come out to light, not it be something demonized, and actually invested in on an educational level, on actually people who might benefit from them on a personal level, and also maybe on a collective level at some point. But we know it's not something to expect from it to create a peace movement or a peace deal tomorrow. It's something that those who are interested in doing so, maybe it's something to go and look at that research and learn what's there, what has been missing in the greatest schemes that we've been trying for the past years and years that obviously failed.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that's a major takeaway, and I hope people do, in fact, look at the parts of how this was orchestrated and those elements, like you said, like the group element, and another big thing that Lior mentioned that stuck out to me when reading that was just the influence of the music. How much music helped move both Palestinians and the Jewish Israelis when they would hear the other language. I think that layering on these different aspects seem to have had this synergistic effect that seemed to be beneficial in, like you said, in helping people feel the other's pain or experience the other's joy or whatever it was, putting themselves in the other's shoes. So I want to thank you both so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you sharing and appreciate all the work that you have done in this area.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. For everybody else out there, until next time. Thanks so much for listening to the Plant Medicine Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us an iTunes rating or review. It helps other people find the show. And if you'd like to find out more about plant medicine, including the show notes from today's episode, please head over to plantmedicine.org. The music for the Plant Medicine Podcast is by the incredible Porangi. If you'd like to check out his music, please find him at porangi.com or on social media at PORANGUI.